In this session, we're going to look at how the brain encodes trauma in certain circumstances. There are 4 requirements for the brain to encode something as traumatic. And the first of those is there needs to be an event occurring that has a particular meaning, and the brain needs to have a particular kind of landscape at the time. I'll say more about that in a moment or two. And it needs to be perceived as inescapable or uncontrollable. Okay, let's have a look at the event first of all. So the event needs to contain some threatening content, and it can be experienced through any of the senses. It can also be experienced either directly, personally, or it can be experienced vicariously. In other words, seeing it happen to someone else or hearing something happen to someone else. Or it may be that they're told a story about something that's happened to someone else, and that's third party. Threatening content can be learned, or it can be innate or unconditional. So when we say learned, it means learning has to happen before the person understands something to be threatening. So a good example of that would be a gun. Innate or unconditional threat stimuli, they're kind of built in. There is a little bit of debate about which ones are fully hardwired and which ones we just learn very rapidly. In psychology and in biology, they would refer to that as preparedness. We come into the world prepared to learn very rapidly certain types of thing as threatening. Okay, so some of these unconditional threat stimuli would be abandonment, attack or threat of attack, somatic pain in the body, heights, suffocation, being trapped, open spaces, predators, both air-based and ground-based, creepy crawly things, darkness, nighttime. We see a lot of people having phobias in these areas, and that list really very much linked to survival or threat to survival. Okay, the second component is meaning. The event needs to have a particular kind of meaning. It's where someone is going to lose something that they are attached to, or at least they're going to perceive that they're going to lose something that they're attached to. And that becomes then threatening. So attachment can be physical, personal, or public. Let's have a look at some of these briefly. So some of the things that we're attached to that we could perceive that we're going to lose. This could be through abuse or stroke or limb loss, loss of senses, illness, assault. These are all threats to our physical being. Obviously, these are just examples. Personal. We may well be attached to our family units, our friendships, to kin, to our co-workers, to our religion, to possessions, to pets, to combat units. Again, this is just a list of examples, but these would be more personal attachments. And again, a loss of these, or a perceived potential loss of these, would be considered threatening. The public ones, we've got some examples here. A more public attachment would be about things like status and cultural identity. So if we're losing our status, there's a threat to our status, our reputation, a loss of our cultural identity, or we're excommunicated or shunned. These are the kinds of things that, again, they can mean a lot to people, and when we perceive that maybe we're going to lose these, it can really be threatening. Okay, the next one is the landscape of the brain and nervous system at any given moment. And That's the neuroelectrochemical state. So in any given moment, our brain and nervous system will have a particular neuroelectrochemical state, and that can be either vulnerable or it can be much more resilient. And here are some of the landscapers of the brain. Some of them can be sort of more long-term, chronic, inescapable stressors, things like poverty, illness, disability, long-term hormonal shifts, anxiety that's persistent, cultural pressures, long-term pain, suffering post-traumatic stress disorder. These are things that can be ongoing and chronic stressors that have the landscape in a more vulnerable state. More acute, inescapable stressors, things that are more transient or more linked to specific circumstances. So anticipating something that's coming up, or it could be something going on at work or school, could be just worrying about something specific, could be issues relating to relationships, the highs and lows of that, stressful time, then that's an acute stressor. Sleep deprivation, we know people will deprive people of sleep as a form of torture, so we know if people aren't getting enough sleep, that's a stressor and can affect the landscape. So these are the kinds of things that might have the landscape as more vulnerable to something being encoded as a traumatic event. And the fourth one is this perception of inescapability. Someone sensing that they're trapped or can't control what's going on, or that something is just unavoidable or inescapable. So just to remind again, the 4 requirements for traumatization are that there's an event that has a particular meaning where there's a threat of loss of something that we're attached to. The landscape of the brain needs to be vulnerable enough for trauma to be encoded, and it needs to be perceived as inescapable.